And I'm live. Candy and I are here. Candy, the wonder dog, come here. She is jumping all over me for her treat. She doesn't care about politics, but if she did, she would be voting for Pierre Poilievre, wouldn't you? If you're voting for Poilievre, speak. There we go. Yeah. Cheesy, I know, whatever. Let me give her a treat, otherwise she'll be jumping all over me. Take a paw. Lay down. Speak. Speak. Get your treat. There we go. I'm a little late. I scheduled for 9:30, 9:33. Danny has showed up already wishing me a good evening. I don't know if he's here right now. He kind of flips in and out until I start. Got my coffee, and Danny always starts off cross, praying hands, cup of coffee, and the emojis, which I'm not too good at using. I'm an old dinosaur. Oh, we're less than, I guess, 72 hours now or so from voting. Monday morning, 9:30 a.m. That is when polls will be open in my province of Ontario. Uh, and then the fun begins. Then the only poll that really matters starts. Over 7 million Canadians have already voted over the Easter weekend, Good Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Easter Monday. Over 7 million votes were cast. And I think that bodes very well for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, because Canadians, we don't elect government so much as we kick governments out. When people are motivated to get out, when they want to change the government, that's when the vote count is high. When people are happy, hey, everything's going okay, people are less inclined to go out and vote. We've had 7+ million, a huge jump, biggest 2 million on the Good Friday alone as a record for advanced polling. And in an earlier video, I said we can probably expect somewhere in around 18 million, punching up maybe north of there. Actually, I'm hoping that we get north of 20 million. If we can get north of 20 million, I think that bodes very well for the Conservative Party. Just to give this some give this some scope, in 2011, that was an election that saw Stephen Harper's Conservatives elected to a majority government. 14.7 million Canadians voted. Then in 2015, with Justin Trudeau promising to make weed, marijuana legal, so giving young people, a lot of young people wanted weed legalized. And I can understand the motivation. Speaking as someone who did partake in my younger years, and I had to do it at a time when you risked being criminal possession of marijuana was a real thing. You could get a criminal record just for passing the Dutchie, to use an old expression, probably from the late 70s, early 90s. So that motivated a lot of young people to get out and vote. I got to plug in that battery, and it's running. Pattern energy savers on, not anymore. I'm powered up. So a big jump, almost 3 million more people voted in 2015 as compared to 2011. Then came 2019, and there was a very small increase. Went from 17.6 in 2015 to 18.1. About 580,000 more Canadians voted in 2015 versus 2019. Now, our population is growing, so there should be some natural increase, but there wasn't any big bump. And Trudeau's Liberals fell from a sizable majority down to a minority situation. And actually, in that 2015 election, more in that 2019 election, the Conservative Party of Canada won the popular vote. They actually got more votes than the Liberals, but the Liberals won more seats. And then in 2021, our most recent election, the vote total actually went down, went from 18.1 down to 17 million. 1.1 million fewer Canadians bothered to vote, even with population increasing. And again, the Trudeau Liberals were returned with a minority. But again, they lost the popular vote, but they won the most seats, allowing them to stay in power. Um, Danny is here just catching up at double speed, and a monarchy has shown up as well. There are other people watching. You're welcome to fill that live chat up. I want this to be live and interactive. I'm hoping that some younger people show up. And by younger, I'm 58. So if you're south of 40, heck, if you're south of 50, uh, I hope you're showing up on the live stream. I'm hoping you're enthused, excited about this election. Younger people, I've spoken to a number. Many I have spoken to are very anxious to get out and vote. There's a young lad I work with, kid by the name of Colin, voting in his first election. I encouraged him to get informed, and he told me today he's going with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. I gave him some things to look up. I said, look up Mark Carney's letter. Look up Mark Carney's letter. Just do a simple Google search. Go to a reliable source. Mark Carney letter to the shareholders at Brookfield, encouraging them to vote in favor of moving high-paying Canadian jobs down to New York City, to Donald Trump's old playground. And sure enough, Mr. Captain Canada, Mark Carney, Mr. Elbows Up, was encouraging Brookfield shareholders to back just at the end of 2024, was encouraging shareholders at Brookfield. This is a time, when the Americans have elected Donald Trump to be president, and he's encouraging shareholders at Brookfield, where he was the chairman of the board, or if you prefer the more politically correct term, the chair of Brookfield Asset Management, and he was encouraging shareholders to vote in favor of moving Brookfield's head office from Toronto down to New York City. And the shareholders, they took Mark Carney's advice. Smart guy, that Mark Carney. He wants these high-paying jobs, doesn't want them in Canada, wants them down in New York City. And then we just found out, of course, that Mark Carney lied about his phone call with President Trump in the early days of his being installed as Prime Minister pro tem, where he got basically coronated by the Liberal Party and he got to play the role of Prime Minister. He made a call to Donald Trump, and afterwards he reported that Donald Trump respects Canada's sovereignty, this 51st state stuff, that's over. I'm here now. I'm Captain Canada. And oh, yay for Mark Carney. Trump's giving up on making us the 51st state. Well, these phone calls that take place between Carney and foreign leaders, the same thing has happened to Trump when he had a call years ago with Zelensky, and likewise with Biden. The contents of these conversations are not secret, and it has come out, and Carney has been forced to admit that he lied, that Trump did in fact bring up his continued desire to have Canada as the 51st state. Mark Carney didn't change anything. Donald Trump just played it down low for a while because Donald Trump wants Mark Carney to win. He's on public record stating that in an interview on US broadcast news media, saying the Liberals are easier to deal with. Why are the Liberals easier to deal with? Look at the state of the Canadian economy. Donald Trump is a bully, and bullies like to pick on the weak. And with Mark Carney and the Liberal Party elected to a fourth term, he can be assured, Donald Trump can be assured that Canada will be in a weak position. Our economy, worst in the G7. We earn 60 cents to what Americans earn. If we were a US state, we'd be on par with on just about par with Mississippi, like the worst performing state economically in the US. Let's see, Anna Jonda is here. She's asking, so what would Poilievre do different than Carney vis-a-vis, and I think you meant to write President Trump, but you wrote Premier Trump. What would he do different? Number one, he would develop our energy resources, primarily oil and gas, and he would seek out foreign markets for them. Right now, India, for just one example, is burning coal to generate hydroelectricity. They want India, South Korea, Japan have all said, sell us your LNG, liquefied natural gas, sell us Canadian LNG so we can stop burning coal. And Mark Carney is in favor of a bill called C-69, which puts massive regulatory hurdles that makes it basically impossible for any energy infrastructure program to get off the ground. Talking about something like Energy East pipeline, talking about Trans Mountain pipeline that would allow Canadian resources to get to market, to international markets. Right now, almost all our oil and all of our natural gas head down to Donald Trump's United States. Poilievre wants to expand the markets. That way, we exploit the wealth that exists within Alberta, which is good for all of Canada. I think there's a tendency for people in my province of Ontario to go, oh, screw Alberta. Why should we worry about developing their resources? Because, and the reason we should care is because it's that old axiom of a rising tide lifts all ships. If the Albertan economy starts to grow because of energy, it lifts the entire Canadian economy. There are transit fees, there's construction, there's so much wealth to be generated in this country by getting pipelines going, Energy East and Trans Mountain, getting our oil and natural gas. And the way you transport natural gas is you have to liquefy it. And the way you liquefy it is it has to be cooled. And we have a huge advantage in this country given our weather. Go up to northern Alberta. I've been to Wainwright, Alberta in September and been slugging through a foot of snow. It's cold in Alberta. So that's one big difference that he would do for Canada as a whole. Uh, and that would make it. And then if we sell our oil and natural gas to Europe, then that decreases Europe's dependency on Vladimir Putin and Russia for energy, for oil and gas. If they can buy Canadian, then they don't have to fund the Russian war machine. So huge for the Canadian economy. Number two, he wants to eliminate all the regulatory hurdles that just about double the cost of building a house in this country. If it's going to cost 280, 400,000, we'll say 400,000 to build a house in land cost and construction. Well, it costs double that amount. So it costs more than 400,000 in licensing fees, regulatory approvals, bureaucratic red tape. It costs so much to get a house built in this country beyond simply buying the land and the construction costs. There are all these regulatory fees that are associated. Now, what Poilievre has promised to do is to provide incentives to the municipal and provincial levels of government to get rid of that red tape so that houses can be built, because we've been under 10 years of explosive immigration in this country, adding somewhere in the neighborhood of 750,000 people a year. That's basically pretty much adding a province to our country in terms of population, adding a province every year or two. So that's another one. Um, and Anna Jonda she meant to say premier, fair enough. Premier, Trump, whatever the case. Um, Danny is saying, I heard Pierre said, bring back plastic bags, straws, cutlery. That alone should get Pierre a vote. Well, the funny thing is, the getting rid of plastic bags and plastic straws is basically a virtue signaling tool. It's to make people feel like they're doing something, even though it has zero tangible impact at all. Um, and that's sadly, it's just the reality. Go to the grocery store and bring home what you buy, and then separate all the plastic. Our milk comes in a plastic bag, and then there are three plastic bags in another plastic bag. You buy cookies, and it's in a plastic tray surrounded by a plastic wrapper. You buy bread, it's in a plastic bag. You buy everything plastic, plastic, plastic. And then we turn around, we say, well, we're gonna, and you go and you've probably got a pound or more of plastic in your grocery cart. And then you say, can I have some plastic bags? And oh no, we're not allowed to sell plastic bags. I already have a pound of plastic here in my grocery cart. Now I just can't have plastic bags. It's virtue signaling. It's just to make you feel good. But it has no tangible impact on anything. It's just stupid. I don't really care personally. You know, the plastic issue, nah, because plastics are in our oceans. Um, their fish have little microplastics in them. I think a world with less plastic would be good. But we just went through the COVID era where everyone was wearing a face diaper, which is made from petrochemical products, and everyone was throwing them on the ground. I kept picking them up because I didn't care. Uh, this whole idea that this thing is it's covered in, deadly pathogens. Give me a break. I'd pick it up barehanded, throw it in the garbage. People would go, you shouldn't be touching that. And I'm like, I'm fine. This is overblown. Um, Now, Anna John is saying, have they actually said that though? They burn coal because it's cheap and plentiful. Right. And but they have India, Korea, and Japan have all asked to buy Canadian liquefied natural gas, but we can't get it to them. Do some reading, do some research on it. Yes, there is a huge demand for LNG. This whole climate thing has a lot of countries wanting to lower their carbon footprint, and natural gas burns far cleaner than coal. It releases far less carbon into the atmosphere than does coal. And besides that, coal makes the air dirty. Natural gas doesn't. I, full disclosure, I think, guess what? I'm going to state this categorically. We could stop burning fossil fuels completely. No more fossil fuels. No oil, no gas, no natural gas, no more fossil fuels at all. Guess what? The climate is still going to change. Climate changes. Look up a period called the Little Ice Age. Look up the medieval warming period. Cyclical periods of warming and cooling happen, always have, always will. We have centuries long periods of warming, then we have centuries long period of cooling, then centuries long period of heating, warming up, and these cycles last in and around 400 years. And we're only halfway through the current warming trend. The medieval warming period, temperatures were far higher than what they are now. And we weren't burning any fossil fuels back then. And then the Little Ice Age came in, and there were catastrophic weather events, hailstorms like nobody had ever seen before. And Northern Europe, there's a historical record of these cataclysmic weather events. And back then, they believed it was human caused back then too, 14, 15, 1600s. No, these weather events are beyond anything we've seen in living memory. There's got to be human beings have to be causing it. And back then, there was a term called weather cooking. They believed that witches were consorting with the devil because these weather events that we're seeing are unprecedented, kind of like what we're hearing now. You know, the warmest day on record. When did you start keeping records? Oh, 1920, 1880. Really? That's it? You know, just 100 to 200 years of worth of history. And when cyclical patterns of heating and cooling last 400 years and you only have 100, 200 years worth of data, come on. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. People back then, back during that little ice age, cataclysmic weather, never seen anything like this. So, and that's a big argument why a lot of people will say they believe that anthropogenic or human caused climate change has to be real because I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. And my parents, my grandparents, this is unheard of. Well, yeah, in our short little window, of time. But if you go back far enough, if you go back, to the 11, 12, 1300s, yeah, climate change. The Vikings went to Greenland and they established permanent settlements. Anaconda's filling it up. Um, Anaconda is writing a rising tide. Isn't that the exact same principle behind Reaganomics that caused the recession of the 90s? Reagan was president of the United States from 1980 to 1988. And he took over from Jimmy Carter. And during Jimmy Carter's time, the world economy and the American economy, Canadian economy was in recession. Then Reagan came in and there was a recession in the early 80s, and then things started taking off. And that proceeded into the 90s. And the 90s was something of a boom period. The baby boom population was in their highest earning years, and things really took off in the 90s. The Clinton became president in 1992. Uh, and then everything came crashing down with the dot-com bubble in and around 2000. And Monarchy's writing, we need more likes. Sounded on my speaker like Gordon said something about police. I didn't say anything about the police yet. Most police and jail guards are cool, regular people, in my extensive experience. And sadly, Anna Monarchy does have some experience. I think we've all had experience dealing with the police, and overwhelmingly, my experience in dealing with law enforcement has been unbelievably positive. I've had some amazing experiences with law enforcement. I find, to serve and protect. And are there bad apples? Yeah, there are. There are bad apples, but the good apples far outweigh the bad apples. Um, Now let's see. Anna John to write, sure, if Canadian hydrocarbons and petrocarbons are cheaper, that's a big if. Well, if you think that burning coal is equivalent to burning natural gas, I can't help you because they're not. Natural gas burns far cleaner, far less pollution. I don't really care about the climate stuff, but it's far less pollution. Read Charles Dickens' book Hard Times about a town that burned coal, and there's just a constant cloud over the city. And a lot of Dickens' writing, while the stories are obviously fictional, they were set against a historical backdrop, which is accurate. And back in the 1800s, when coal was the main source, locomotives, trains ran on coal. That's how coal fueled industry, and large industrial centers would have a coal-induced haze over them nearly constantly. And forget the climate. Who wants to be breathing that? We want clean air, clean soil, clean water, and we don't want coal being burned. But Mark Carney, through Brookfield, is invested in coal. So maybe he likes coal. Maybe he doesn't want Canadian natural gas being sold around the world because it'll hurt Brookfield's bottom line. And goodness knows he won't tell us. He's refusing to disclose to Canadians, like Trump. Trump refused to release his tax returns. He didn't want his finances publicly available to American voters. And Carney is the same way. He doesn't want his financial assets being divulged to Canadians until the election is over. Then he has no choice. But before the vote, he won't release them, which I think is a little sketchy at best. Um, and Monarchy has thought about moving to Alberta or BC from Ontario. I think you're like a lot. I looked at it at one point. Um, I, um, I'd have to look as to, coal is probably very cheap. Coal is probably very cheap. And right now, we sell our natural gas, our LNG to the US at a discount to the world market price because they're the only one we can sell it to. Because all the pipelines for natural gas, LNG run north and south. We don't have any way to get our LNG to any other market but to Donald Trump's United States. And that's the way Mark Carney wants to keep it. That's why he's in favor of Bill C-69. And Danny's saying that Gen X, which is my generation, his generation, we're built differently, and we are. And I don't blame the kids for the world they grew up in. The world has changed. Uh, Anna is asking if the people of India are going to pay 3 times as much for their energy. I'm gonna have to do some fact checking on that. Is coal that much cheaper than natural gas? Natural gas burns far more efficiently than coal. I know that, but let's do the old Google. Is coal cheaper? Uh, there. Thank you. Google, is coal electricity? Now, this is the answer I'm getting from AI. Electricity cheaper than natural gas. Here's what AI, which I guess is Gemini, I think in Google's case. In many locations, natural gas fired electricity generation is generally cheaper than coal fired electricity generation. While coal was traditionally cheaper energy source, the rise of natural gas extraction, especially through hydraulic fracturing, I guess that would be fracking, has significantly reduced natural gas prices, making it more economically viable in many areas. Furthermore, natural gas is cleaner and more efficient than coal. So it kind of blows your argument. I don't know if you have something to contrast that. Uh, if you've got another source other than what I'm getting from Google and their AI, artificial intelligence Gemini. And as further writing, India, China, etc., don't care about the environment. They're going to burn whatever is cheapest, which is far more likely to be locally mined coal than LNG from the other side of the world. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So what that tells me then is that Canada should be exploiting our resources because the rationale behind not exploiting our resources, according to the Mark Carneys of the world, is Canada needs to get to net zero. He's big on net zero. Huge. Canada has to be net zero by, I think it's 2040. Got to be net zero carbon emissions. And India, 1.4 billion people, China, 1.4 billion people. They don't care, according to Anna, about the environment. They're just going to keep burning coal. So meanwhile, Canadians with our carbon taxation, which Carney's promising to reintroduce, this is just a little gimmick for the election, going to take carbon taxation down to 0%. until the election. And then if we're dumb enough to elect Mark Carney and his liberal gang again, then he's promising to reimpose carbon taxation directly on companies themselves so that they can pass it on to the consumer. So that gas in Ontario that used to cost $1.50 or more, that's now fallen down to around $1.20. Well, you're going to see it go back up to $1.50, $1.60 and higher because we have to get to net zero, because we have to save the planet, because we've got to get to zero carbon emissions. But even Anna is recognizing that India and China, they're just going to keep pumping out, and they're 35 times larger than our population, 40 million versus 1.4 billion. It's about China's about 35 times our size in terms of population. India, 35 times our population. So is Canada going to save the planet from, even if, let's argue that carbon is driving global climate change, it's warming the planet. Well, what's Canada going to do about it? We're going to freeze in the dark while the Chinese and Indian economies soar, and we go poor. So Anna's right. So Pierre's idea that they're suddenly going to shell out to buy our gas and oil is laughable. No, it's not. Right now, Europe is buying it from Russia. And at the same time, they want to reduce, have publicly stated, France, Great Britain, Germany, they want to reduce their dependency on energy coming from Russia because it's fueling their war effort. And it's, a bellicose Russia is concerning for Western Europe. They're afraid that, okay, it's Ukraine today, but what if it's Finland tomorrow? And so they want to reduce their dependency, but they can't get their hands on Canadian energy because we can't send it to them. So it's not laughable. And Anna is just stating, I don't know where she got this from. There's no probably about it. Coal is the cheapest carbon-based fuel. Give me a source for that. I gave you my source for is coal electricity cheaper? Again, this is AI overview from Google. Natural gas-fired electricity is generally cheaper than coal-fired electricity generation. Now, that's not me. You can type that into Google yourself. Is coal electricity cheaper than natural gas? And see what you come up with. But of course, Anna on a live chat on my live stream, there's no maybe about it. I'm an expert, like Mark Carney. Mark Carney is an expert on the climate and meteorology. He's got no degrees in it whatsoever, but no educational background in these sciences, but he knows. I've listened to a guy like Richard Lindzen. I would invite you to check him out. Former chair, not just a professor, but the chair of the meteorological departments at both Harvard and MIT. And does that mean he's right? No, but he certainly is more qualified to talk about climate than Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre for that matter. And Max Power is here. Happy Friday. Good evening, my friends. Hey, we got a lot of people showing up on the live chat. Max voted early for Pierre, and so did all my brothers. Let's bring it home, everyone. We're coming into the weekend, and the biggest way you can impact this election is to not only vote yourself, but to ensure you bring someone else or get someone else to the polls on Monday. And there are a lot of people out there who do not pay attention to politics that closely. This young kid, Colin, who I work with, I gave him some issues to look up. He checked into it. He said, yeah, I'm all in for Pierre. I went, great. I said, make sure you get to the polls on Monday, 9:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. That's in my province of Ontario. The voting hours are somewhat staggered. I think in the Eastern time zones, it's 8:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. By the time you get to the West Coast, BC, is 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. I think there's the potential that in this election, for the first time in my memory, we could be waiting on the results from BC before we know who won and lost. We will see. We will see. Um, and I also mentioned Good Friday, not Good Friday, Easter Sunday was in Mississauga. And my wife has two nephews, or my sister-in-law's nephews, my nephews, two university age students. They're both at Guelph University, voting for the first time. And they both were like, Paul, without any prompting, I said, "Are you voting?" They said, "Oh, yeah, we're going to vote." They said, "Who are you voting for?" They said, "Oh, Poilievre, all the way, Poilievre." And I'm like, I love hearing the young people so enthusiastic, and I don't blame them because if you're in your early 20s, you've seen what's happened. When I went to university, too many years ago, all the way back in the 80s, how much did it cost? My tuition was $1,100-$1,200 a year at York University. $1,100-$1,200. I don't even know what it is now. I knew back then, back in my era, for residence and books and everything else, you needed about $5,000-$6,000 to be able to afford to go to university. And people say politics doesn't matter. Look where we are now. Look at the cost of housing. When I was going to university in years after, home ownership was an attainable goal. You could see the finish line. Now kids look, if they're and I was growing up in Pickering, Ontario. Now kids look at the housing market and they go, forget it, forget it. Forget 400,000. Now it's 1.2 million, 1.4 million. And for a house that isn't all that great shakes, for something that's going to need work. If you want something move-in ready in Toronto, you better have 1.62 million. And how are and how are you ever going to save the money for a down payment when you're being taxed at the wazoo and just to fill up your car, costs you 80, 90, $100 just to get around. 10 years of liberal rule. This is what has happened. Housing costs have doubled. And young kids, if you want to have a future, and don't disconnect from it. Don't think that, oh, Pierre Poilievre got elected. Okay, everything's going to be rainbows and unicorns. You got to hold his feet to the fire. He has to deliver on the promises he has made. He's promised a 15% reduction in income tax. Let's see it. He's promised to reduce regulations so that housing can get built without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for assessments and regulatory approvals and everything else. Well, deliver on it, Pierre. Right? But the plan that the Liberals have put forward is to bury us under practically another $750 billion in debt. What happens right now? We spend more just on interest than we do on health care. The Department of Debt Servicing would be pretty much the largest government department. If they had just a department, a cabinet position, Minister of Debt Repayment, Minister of Interest Payments, they'd have the biggest portfolio, managing 60, 70, $80 billion a year. That just to pay the interest, doesn't pay the debt down. And every year we add more to it. This year, 60 plus $billion more got heaped onto the pile. Blah, blah, blah. Just going to read up on what's being said. Anna John is now saying natural gas is cheaper to generate electricity. That's the point. Electricity is what drives the economy. If you have a ready supply that isn't on the other side of the planet, it doesn't cost that much to ship natural gas. It does not cost that much to ship it. It's done in massive quantity if you have pipelines, but we don't have pipelines. We're not allowed to have pipelines. We're only allowed to have pipelines north and south. Like the gasoline that I filled my car up with A lot of it comes from Alberta. But first, it goes from Alberta down to the United States to the Gulf Coast, gets refined into gasoline. Then it comes up through another pipeline, and then it goes into my car. We are incredibly dependent on the United States of America. And that happened all the way back in 1988 when I was 22 years of age and voting against free trade. Back then I voted liberal. The liberals were opposed to free trade. They wanted Canada to have its sovereignty. And the conservatives were the ones who were promoting free trade under Brian Mulroney. Now things have flipped around. Now we've got Mark Carney, a central banker who was at Morgan Stanley for years. The Morgan Stanleys of the world are the entities that created dubious financial instruments like subprime lending that just about crashed the world economy. Then they came up with their inflationary quantitative easing. Create a problem, here's a solution. Create a problem, here's a solution. The Morgan Stanleys of the world, where Mark Carney comes from, created this idea of subprime lending in the US housing market, giving people who couldn't qualify for a credit card mortgages. And that ballooned the US real estate market. Then when it crashed, it threatened to take down the entire global economic system because there was a liquidity crisis in the capital markets. There was no more money. We had banks like Lehman Brothers completely collapsing. So then but by then, Mark Carney had moved into the banking role, central banking system. And then the central bank said, oh, we've got a solution, quantitative easing. We'll crank out more money. We'll ease the restrictions on how much money. We'll just flood the market with more money, which is inflationary. And then what do we get in a situation now after having gone through this quantitative easing crap that he brought in here and he brought it in when he went over to the Bank of England. And listen to what Brits say about their inflation. Quantitative easing is incredibly inflationary. Anyway, the live chat is being filled up. I love it. What's my source on what numbers? And I'm gonna, I know you and I are on opposite sides, fair enough. But when you ask me a question, and this happens a lot, what are your sources on those numbers? When you put up a comment like that, be specific, because I can't always read the messages as you write them. So I sometimes have to backtrack. What numbers are you talking about? So I'm just going to try and catch up on the messages. I'm going to start with Max. I don't think any of the climate change and emission arguments make any tax power. Mark Carney keeps talking about the fact that Canada is in crisis. We are in a crisis, and we're not in a crisis yet. A crisis may be coming. Mark Carney has signaled that we're going to go into a crisis if he becomes prime minister. He will, of course, say if in this timeline he does become prime minister, well, there will be a crisis, and you will say, well, it was inevitable. I knew it was happening. This is why you elected me. And now I'm going to bring in these draconian measures to help Canadians weather the storm. He wants everyone driving an electric vehicle in a country where it's wintertime a lot of the time. And EV batteries are far less efficient. They store far less power. They last much less in the winter than they do in the summer months. Everyone knows that. When you have a flashlight in extreme cold, it doesn't work as well. Your cell phone battery starts to go down a lot quicker when it's cold out. Lithium-ion battery in there. We all know this just from common experience. And your car is no different. A lithium-ion battery in your car, it's just bigger in scale than the lithium-ion battery running your phone. And you know that cold weather impacts. And likewise, we just had a major snowstorm, ice storm here. I know people who were out of power for 5, 6 days. What are they supposed to do when their power when their electricity is down for days at a time or a week at a time. You can't drive, you can't get to the grocery store, you can't get to that medical appointment, you can't get to, you know, important events, you can't get to your doctor because your car won't run because there's no electricity, you can't plug it in. It's winter, the battery isn't very efficient anyway because it's cold out, and he wants to force this on us. Read up on it. Uh, anyway, Anna's saying, costs money to pipe gas to that part of the world from this part of the world. Of course it does. And it costs money to ship Russian oil and gas from Russia to Western Europe. What do you think the Europeans would rather buy? Do you think they'd rather buy Putin's, who scares them? And legitimately so. He invaded Ukraine. Could he invade Finland? If he got Finland, could he invade Sweden? Could he invade Western Europe? It's possible. I mean, that's a fear that a lot of people have. You hear them talking about it all the time. Well, is he the one you want to be buying his oil and gas, or would you rather buy Canadian? Reasonable question. And I think Western Europeans would much prefer to have Canadian gas, Canadian oil, than Russian. Anyway, Anna Monarchy is writing, I was fried on cough medicine that BC trip, no pun intended. Okay. Evening Max, everyone wishing. I think I got to this. Yeah, good, cheap, dirty coal. I don't know how, I think the efficiency of natural gas, is it's far more efficient. You use far less than coal. Coal, you have to use a boatload. And again, I'm going off what Google's AI tool Gemini says. If you've got something that contradicts it, fire it away at me. And Eat Me is writing that there's an incoming rally, Pierre rally in Pickering, if I heard correctly. He just had a major rally in Saskatchewan. And I found this interesting. CTV News tried to frame it in the context of, is Pierre worried that Saskatchewan, which almost always votes pretty much everyone they elect, is a conservative? Is he afraid of losing seats in Saskatchewan? Is he trying to save the, you know, save the house kind of thing? Say, is this a signal of weakness? Is the way they were trying to portray it, and I think that's a joke. What Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives wanted to do, his rallies are attracting thousands of people. The one in Saskatoon was a warehouse, standing room only, packed in like sardines. I don't know how many people, probably 1,000 plus. And it just, it's good image for the media. It's a good thing to promote on social media. It's a good thing to have out there with thousands of people, enthusiastically supporting your campaign. And he knows he's been filling it everywhere. He filled it down in Nova Scotia, filled it out in BC, fills up in Ontario, Vaughan. So he's filling up everywhere. But Saskatchewan also, you gotta, you have to throw a bone to your base every now and again, and let them know you're not forgotten. I'm not taking you for granted. And so it served a dual purpose. And I'm not worried about Saskatchewan. There are other people saying that Pierre's in trouble in his own riding. Save me. He will win by thousands of votes. It won't even be close in the riding of Carleton, even though they bombed his riding with 91 total candidates to try and make it almost impossible to vote. You got to go through 91 names looking for Pierre is one of 91 candidates. And they think that's going to make a difference, but you do what you got to do. Eat Me is evening, everyone. Happy Friday. Hey. Oh, Anne Monarchy's talking about having to spend a fortune on textbooks. I hate the textbook thing that annoyed the living crap out of me is university professors, when they're cited in a text, they get royalties. And so what they do is every year they come out with an updated version and they change the chapter order. They make little additions, little subtractions. Then when you're sitting in the class and they say, if you look at chapter 10, section 3, and you go to section 10, chapter 3, if you have last year or a text from 3 or 4 years ago, well, it's you're not going to be reading the right thing. They'll have changed the order around. And the professors at the beginning of the year say it's important for you to have the most up-to-date version for this very reason. And it's like, and it's done on purpose to generate cash for university professors who get royalties because they're quoted in those books. The textbooks was unreal. That's why I like taking humanities courses. Humanities courses, you were dealing with reading books, reading Ragtime, Scarlet Letter, what was Michael and Dante, English Patient, or In the Skin of a Lion, Margaret Lawrence, The Diviners. I did a lot of lit, read a lot of books, and when you're reading a novel, there's no. But when you're reading a textbook on real democracy, then you're screwed. You got to get the most up to date version if you want to be able to follow during the lectures, because they'll say, as per chapter 3, section 4, and you're like, well, you're talking about de Tocqueville. Mine's talking about Marxism. What's going on? Anyway, uh, yeah, I asked Stan and John to help me out with the numbers question. Oh, things are jumping around on the chat. It's hard for me to keep up. Um, Anna's asking, are you saying that Carney was involved with the subprime mortgage crisis? Because I'm pretty sure that he was the head of the UK central bank at that time. No, he was not head of the UK. He didn't become Canada's um, head of the Bank of Canada until sometime 2006, 7, 8. And the subprime lending started in the US in 2002, 3, 4, when he was with the Morgan Stanley. The Morgan Stanleys of the world. And I'm not saying Mark Carney, he himself created subprime lending. I don't think he's that smart. Um, what he did, he was part of that industry. He was part of that Wall Street industry, Morgan Stanley. It's Morgan Stanley's, the Lehman Brothers, the Goldman Sachs. It's these companies that created subprime lending when Mark Carney was in that domain, working at Morgan Stanley. Then he was named head of the Bank of Canada as the what his industry had created, subprime lending, collapsed. And then he had the solution: print more money. They called it quantitative easing. That's basically the government would issue bonds, and then the central banks would buy them up by printing out more money, injecting capital into the marketplace, because so much capital had disappeared as houses that were worth at one time on paper, they were worth 700,000, 800,000. Now they were worth 80, 90, 100,000, and people started to walk away in the United States. But our banking act, the Harper government extended amortizations on mortgages. Our banking act, which is political, it's not part of the central bank. Our banking act in Canada, you can't just walk away from your mortgage. We have something called power of sale in this country. The Americans did not. It's rather convoluted. But there's a big difference between the Canadian banking rules and the American banking rules. And thanks to our uh, Banking Act, which is an act of Parliament, not an act of the central banks, uh, we did not suffer as badly in this country. When Harper and Jim Flaherty, who was Minister of Finance at the time, started to allow amortizations to go up to 40 years. First standard forever has been 25. You get a mortgage the first time, it's a 25-year amortization. You pay it off over 25 years. Then they extended it to 30, then 35, then 40. And what that did is it kept the housing market in this country afloat, and we didn't implode the way they did in the US, thanks to the government of the day. At the time, I was critical of it. I thought, hey, 35, 40-year amortizations to low, and that you're spreading the payments out over a longer period of time. So the payment schedule goes down, allowed more people to stay in their homes. But I thought it was a slippery slope. But then, as the crisis eased, it went from 40 to 35 down to 30 and then back to 25 again. It worked. Um, Check into Carney's timeline. You'll see when he became Central Bank of Canada, about right around the time he became the head of the Canada Central Bank, right around the time of the financial crisis. Let's do the old Google thing again. So they pointed to the governor of the Bank of Canada. He was appointed in October 2007. So then he became an advisor to the outgoing governor, David Dodge, for formally assuming Dodge's position on February 1, 2008, just as Canada and much of the Western world was plunged into the great financial crisis because of, Goldman Sachs and the Morgan Stanleys, the Lehman Brothers of the world had created these financial instruments called subprime mortgages. I did a video talking about how it was basically built on quicksand. You had the subprime lending, and then those mortgages were then bundled into an investment vehicle, and they used a bogus financial mathematical equation to rate these investment vehicles as AAA, which meant that pension funds could invest in them. And the way they did that, I mean, it was insane what happened. I read a lot of articles on it at the time. Convertible debenture something. It was a CDI was the acronym. What they did was they would take thousands of mortgages, subprime, crappy mortgages, and bundle them together. And basically, they would always have money flowing into them because while 10% of the mortgages in this bundle fail? Yeah. 40%? Yeah. 50? Yeah. Maybe even 80. But are all of them going to fail? Well, no, that's pretty much impossible. That 100% of the mortgages within a bundle, thousands of mortgages bundled together. There's no way all of them are going to fail. So there's going to be some that are still returning revenue, that are people making their payments. So that meant there would always be money flowing into this investment vehicle. And because of that, they were able to assign it a AAA investment contract. And then it was sold to pension funds. And then insurance companies insured it. And then reinsurance. And it was like houses built on quicksand. And eventually the quicksand gave way and everything began to sink. So Anne Monarchy writes, pipelines get rid of penguins from zoos unless they are being saved from an Exxon Valdez spill or something. It's evil that creatures are kept in um, inhospitable environmental conditions. Not a big, no, it's been a while since I've been to a zoo. But uh, yes, Anna Monarchy, I can interpret. Took me a second to get inhospitable, but I got it. Sharunian is here. What does orange emblem mean on YouTube? I have no idea. Don't know what the orange emblem means on YouTube. Anna Jonda, what are you writing now? I thought it was Poilievre saying that there would be a crisis if Carney is elected. Well, yeah, it will be. It will be. Carney is saying that we're in a crisis right now, but we're not. But it will be a crisis if Carney is elected because we're going to keep our resources in the ground. We're not going to exploit Canada's enormous natural resource wealth in things like oil and natural gas. Um, he's talking about reimposing a new carbon tax. The old one, it was kind of like a value added tax, where when you went to the gasoline, it was added to the price, or when you went to the pump, it was added to the price of a liter of gas. Now, what he's doing, instead of taxing the consumer directly, he's going to tax companies and they'll just pass it on to us. So the government still takes in more money. Uh, you have to remember that it is Carney who's been acting as the top economic advisor to the Trudeau Liberals since the year 2020. And I want to keep the focus on younger people. Look at what has happened over the last 5, 10 years. The doubling of housing costs, inflation through the roof, forget ever buying a home. This vainglorious effort to save the planet from carbon, plant food, is going to crush the Canadian economy. He's also talking about exploding Canada's population from its current 40 million, which has been growing at a breakneck pace, faster than infrastructure like housing can keep up. We're, we're bringing in all these people, but we're not building the infrastructure to keep up with it. And, there's another component of the housing crisis. When you add 750,000 people in just a year, well, you better build some homes. You can't do that in Canada because you have to go through so much regulatory red tape and it adds to the cost and the price goes through the roof and people get priced right out. So both Carney is saying there will be a crisis, and so is Poilievre if Carney is elected. Poilievre is preaching the politics of hope. Carney is preaching the politics of fear. It's going to be a crisis. You need me to deal with this crisis. Poilievre is saying he's giving you a reason for hope. Now you can choose fear, or you can choose hope. In a way, they're both emotional, just emotional, but both emotional. But fear invites a pride. So it takes you back to your caveman days. I mean, it's often been said if you're naked and starving in a hut in the middle of winter, you'll go running out of that hut naked and starving to death if there's a bomb coming down at it. If you're afraid, fear is the greatest motivator. And hope, I don't know. I'm hoping more Canadians are hopeful than are afraid. Because if that's the case, we'll be looking at a conservative government on Monday. What's Sharunian saying? Sharun, I don't like this. East Indians are problem of Brampton. I know my wife is Sri Lankan, which, it's the same part of the world. The problem isn't, whether it's Indian or Somali or whatever part of the world that people come to Canada from, or China or wherever it happens to be. The problem is the numbers. Can we accommodate? Are we bringing in so many that our infrastructure can't keep up? Canada needs immigration. Our fertility rate is 1.3, 1.4. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's far below what it needs to be for us to maintain our population. To maintain population where it is, Canada would need a fertility rate of 2.1, meaning on average, women during their childbirthing years would need to give birth to 2.1 children on average. And we're like 1.2, 3, 4, whatever it is, it's far below. So the only way we can maintain our population is to bring in significant numbers of immigrants, probably 300,000 a year. But we're bringing in double, triple the amount we need, and we're not building the infrastructure to keep up with it, and Carney wants it to go even higher. By the turn of the next century, by the year 2100, he wants the population, the Century Initiative, at 100 million. That's massive growth. That is massive growth. It's like a million a year over the next that let's see what Danny's writing. Evening. Anarchy's writing Happy Friday. I can't quite read that. Anna's writing, are you comparing flashlight batteries with no, a better example would be I said that and that's true when you go out with a flashlight, but just go outside with your cell phone, which is a lithium ion battery when it's 10 or 20 below, and see how long it lasts in the winter versus in the summer. Everyone knows your cell phone battery lasts longer in the summer months than in the winter because lithium ion. Um, and again, we'll do the Google thing. Yeah. This is, do lithium ion batteries work in cold weather? Says yes, they can work in cold weather, and they generally perform better than lead acid. However, extreme cold can still impact their performance, reducing capacity and affecting charging. So they're better than the old batteries, what I would have in my flashlight. Uh, they're less susceptible to cold weather. Uh, but it says, well, lithium batteries can operate in cold. The chemical reactions involved in storing and releasing energy are slowed down, leading to reduction in available capacity. Uh, and then says you can typically discharge a lithium battery without issues in cold, but charging may be less efficient or restricted below freezing. Proper storage and charging practices are important to maintain battery health and performance, crucial to avoid extreme cold, especially when charging. And consider using battery blankets or heaters to keep the battery warm if necessary. The same thing. I used to live up in North Bay, Ontario, and that was the first place you plugged your car in at night. It had a coil. You need electricity to warm your battery so that it would start in the darn morning. Uh, Danny's bringing up the point that these smart vehicles and electric vehicles are pretty much always smart vehicles. They can be shut down remotely. And we're talking about a government, the Trudeau Liberals with Mark Carney as an advisor, that shut down people's bank accounts for daring to be active politically in a way that the Liberals didn't like. So they reached into their bank accounts and froze them. And it's common knowledge. Everyone knows it. Daniel Hansen is here. Daniel Hansen is writing that lithium is also very dangerous and toxic. Thousands are killed from mining and processing. Um, Completely unrealistic to have total EVs in Canada. What Mark Carney wants. They have legislation either already on the books or planned to ban the sale of the internal cars with an internal combustible engine entirely by the year 2035 or 2040. There's so much information floating out there right now about all this, horrible dystopian future that we're facing with a Carney-led government. And part of it just came out from a group called Horizons Canada, which is a Canadian government agency and directly tied to the Prime Minister's office, Horizons Canada. And do a Google on their report on what they're projecting for the years. We're talking about people losing hope, about people foraging for their own food, going out and having to, kill game to survive. And this is our own government. This is their own projection about what we could be looking at in the years to come. Uh, Anarchy's writing, I was going to say lithium ion. Yeah, the phone batteries run out quicker in the cold. I lived out in the streets all winter. Yeah, Anarchy struggles. And everyone knows that your lithium ion battery in your phone, that your power goes down way quicker if you're outside. I was at the Santa Claus Gate parade or the Carnival parade, one of the two. It was either the Christmas parade or I think it was the Carnival parade in Quebec City, standing outside, freezing my proverbials off. And the phone just goes down. You can almost watch it if you're taking video and stuff. Uh, And Max is chiming in, telling Anna Jonah that it's well known that cold weather and winter temperatures reduce electric vehicle battery performance. Even CBC says reported on this. I don't think, like Anna, there's no problem disagreeing with me, but at the same time, and I know there's a tendency in political discussion to try and jump on any little thing and try to find any little inconsistency. I mentioned I shouldn't have said flashlight batteries, although that's true. It's also true with lithium ion batteries, and everyone knows this. Pick something more substantive. Uh, Whoever gave me your color. Yeah, Sharunian's the color displaying is orange, and he's not too happy with being orange. Whereas Anna is more of a teal. Anna's writing, I'm Googling this about the stuff you said about the batteries not working as well, and I'm not seeing anything backing your position. Okay. I just read you what I here's a company selling them, and it says, well, lithium ion batteries handle cold weather better than most batteries. Temperatures that are high or low still compromise their ability to store and release energy. Um, and here's a CBS News article. I'll give you a CBS News article. You're striking me, Anna, as a mainstream journalism type person. So here's something from. I think I'm allowed to share this. I know that we're not allowed to share news articles on Facebook or other because that's stupid liberal law. Yeah, I'm trying to share. There it is. There's a CBS News article, uh, Anna. And this is when was this written? Engineering professor. And you find someone to support any belief. So if you want to believe that lithium ion batteries can last forever, you'll find someone who will support you in that. Um, so I gave you an article on it. Uh, and Mark, he talks about how, we've all seen this, how the phone warms up indoors, shutting down, but then it goes down to 20%, and you never know how much battery you have left. We've all I'm using Google, except I'm reading the links and ignoring the AI, which isn't very good. Yeah, AI, I don't like interacting with AI. I don't do it purposefully. I don't seek it out, but now you Google things and you get hit with it. Uh, so that's why I gave you a CBS News article quoting a guy who's he's a professor of this type of technology. So and maybe he's out to lunch. Let's not engage in personal attacks. We can disagree without having to be disagreeable. And Max Power provided you can Google what he says is a CBC News article, and it says, yes, frigid weather may reduce your EV battery range. here is how to prepare. Um, and then I don't know how he made it personal. And unfortunately, and it happens to both liberals and to conservatives and to NDP, everyone gets triggered, and it's very easy for everyone to get triggered and to let the mouth or the fingers run off before the brain gets fully engaged. Um, and okay, now I get where Max called Anna incompetent because she wasn't able to find the article that he gave her the exact words for. Blah blah blah. JCP. Okay, I'm just catching up in the chat. There is a total. There's a troll bot, guys. Don't feed him. Carney paid them to be here. I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. Uh, Here, I'll look it up for you, Anna. Uh, yes, frigid temp weather may reduce your EV, and I'll give you the link to make life. Here it is. Here it is. I'm putting it into the chat. Thankfully, I think I'm able to share these out. Control, come on. You know what I'm going to do? There's the link, and I'm going to share my screen. This is what Anna's saying she was unable to find. This is just from last year, January